गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। Today I have with me Dr. Sriparna Pathak. Now Sriparna Pathak is I think one of our very budding uh, what shall I say analysts about China. She studied in China, she understands China, and she writes beautifully about China. And that is why I thought, today evening I must call her over and we can discuss what the outcomes of Tianjin are. At the outset, Dr. Patak, welcome to Ghana Shot once again. We're meeting after a long time. It's been great hearing you from all over the world. Yeah,
Thank you so much, sir. It's always an honor and a pleasure to speak to you and to learn more from you. So it's
right.
always wonderful.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Folks, we all been discussing Tianjin for the past, 96 hours. We spoke about Japan, Tianjin, everything. What's happened in the SCO summit and the Prime Minister's visit to Japan? A lot of things have happened. It's a multi-layered event. I mean, to disaggregate it, Prime Minister went to Japan before he went to China. Then he went to China, had a bilateral with Xi Jinping, and broke some ice. How much of ice? Dr. Patak will tell us, right? And then the next day, he attended the SCO meet, and along with this SCO meet, he had an extended meeting with Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. And then, of course, that whole story is not ended. He's come back, but today Xi Jinping and Putin have met and they've done some gas deals and things like that. And tomorrow they're going to all go the less our prime minister. They're all going to go to Beijing to witness a major military parade for which China has been preparing for about 2 months. And for what? To commemorate the second 80th anniversary of the Second World War, in which China didn't participate. So this is the whole story, right, which has happened in the past 5, 6 days. A lot of news abuzz in the Chinese media, and equally so here. And all kinds of experts have come and given their two bits. There's a lot of hype and hoopla about in Hindi Chini bye bye. I mean, it depends on which bye bye you're talking about, BHAI or BUY. So all that is going on. So we're going to try to make sense out of it. Like always, I believe in the long-term sense of things, not the short-term optics. And we'll continue with this. And it is in that context, I thought Mrs. Patak will be great. So, Dr. Patak, your views and what are the major outcomes of this Tianjin, event which happened?
Thank you, sir. This Tianjin summit, it happened as there have been very increasing strains owing to the misplaced priorities of Donald Trump, Trump 2.0 administration, and because he now wants the creation of a new world order in which, only the US is there as an emperor. So that's the backdrop. And unfortunately, the US has thrown friends, partners, and allies under the bus, just the way it had tried to throw the Chinese under the bus. So this was the backdrop under which all of behind all this SCO clamor which was taking place. Now, when we are talking about Prime Minister Modi's visit to Tianjin, to begin with, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Tianjin was to attend the SCO summit. Projecting it as a visit to China defeats the basic premise behind the visit. It's pertinent to remember that it was Russia which facilitated India's entry into the SCO, while China, to keep India in check, even at the SCO, brought Pakistan in. But okay, that's a bit back in history. The second thing is the expansion of the SCO took place last year, and India is a very important voice of the global south, which is facing 50% tariffs. So, why would India rationally not choose to leverage the expanded SCO to address some of these issues, which will be fallouts of Donald Trump's tariffs on India's gems or India's textiles and so on? There are these rumblings of this India China reset or Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai in the backdrop of Trump's illogical and hypocritical tariffs. But here's the thing, even if we take the tariffs as a starting point, in the last 1 month that we see, India has been engaging in talks and agreements in the realm of defense, economics, with its time tested partner, Russia. Russia, which is also one of the most important linchpins of the SCO. Now, few examples of these discussions from the last 1 month with Russia include the emphasis of a strategic partnership between India and Russia, the focus on bilateral security and trade when India's NSA Ajit Dovalji met Russia's Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu and President Vladimir Putin in August. There have been discussions exploring a free trade agreement, the signing of the terms of reference between India and the Eurasian Economic Union, and so on. None of these have been discussed and signed between India and China. So I don't understand why the clamor behind Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai is just increasing. There's a huge amount of uh, absence of trust between India and China. If anything, while speaking to Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Modi reiterated that the relations between India and China have to be based on mutual trust, on mutual respect, and mutual sensitivity. Now, this is not the first time that this has been mentioned. At the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan last year, Prime Minister Modi again had talked about these three mutuals: mutual trust, mutual respect, and sensitivity. If it's being reiterated now, it means that it's not been yet accomplished. If it was accomplished, it wouldn't be repeated and reiterated. Now, as Sir also mentioned, Prime Minister Modi did not attend the Victory Day parade in China, which is to celebrate the 80th anniversary of Japan's surrender in the Second World War and so on. If the Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai was really happening, Prime Minister Modi would have been there. And he wouldn't have visited Japan to begin with. One always visits the country or the partner which is the closest to one's foreign policy goals. Now, if we actually take a look at what the Tianjin SCO summit said and would it likely achieve for India any sort of thing with regards to China? First, there is a lot of this talk about a cautious thaw in bilateral relations because the summit facilitated this high level bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping, and both leaders emphasized India and China are development partners and not rivals. Diplomacy and these sorts of words always go on, but one needs to look at the facts on the ground. The fact is that while disengagement has happened, de escalation is yet to happen. And at the borders, the armies still hold the ground. Um, there was a reaffirmation of new patrolling norms around the 3,500-kilometer line of actual control. While they might look like success, but the fact is, if it's being mentioned, the problem exists. So there is no real credibility to any of this so-called thaw, etc. Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping also discussed reducing India's trade deficit with China, which has always been there for the last 20 years. It reached a record $99.2 billion in 2025. And the summit explored how to boost economic ties and so on. But here's the thing, the SCO's focus has always been on trade and investment. So why is it being expected that India or Prime Minister Modi won't talk about trade and that talking about it means any sort of warming up with the PRC? I think one of the most important things which happened at the SCO was that India used the SCO platform to reinforce its anti-terrorism stance, particularly against Pakistan after the Pahalgam attack. If one remembers, when the SCO defense ministers meeting happened earlier this year, the SCO countries had refused to call out the terrorism. But this time, because of India's diplomacy, because of India's engagement, there was the mention of the Pahalgam attack. So that's a victory for India. And the fact is that yes, Prime Minister Modi's presence there possibly got this sort of attraction and getting the countries together to call Pakistan out. Now, SCO provides India a platform to engage with not just China, but more importantly, Russia and all other regional powers. I think we've all seen the imagery of Vladimir Putin waiting for Prime Minister Modi and them going in the car. Yeah, there was a visual of the three holding hands together as well, but that's just one. And that's just optics and that's just signaling. So, all in all, the fact over here is that it's not going to be a full resolution of border disputes. China keeps talking about management of disputes, not resolution. So, if one is expecting that the ties have warmed up, there's going to be resolution, that's not going to happen. Even earlier this year, when Rajnath Singh ji had raised the issue and had talked about a permanent solution to the problems around Tibet, China had, as always, said that it'll be resolved sometime in future. Something which you know, earlier also in the 1950s also has been said to India. When exactly in future is it going to be resolved? No one really knows. Now, despite discussions on improving trade ties, the summit did not yield any concrete measures to address India's 99.2 billion trade deficit with China. There is a structural imbalance and it stays. That's another problem. Again, the summit did not lead to a convergence of India and China's strategic outlooks. Both the sides emphasized cooperation, but India's concerns about China's support for Pakistan or China's creation of this mega dam project in Tibet, which will reduce the Brahmaputra's flows by 85% in the dry season, none of these have actually been resolved. So that just stays. Um, and there is the fact that China is increasing its influence in South Asia. That is something which is in India's immediate neighborhood. And that is also just increasing. You know, China has made loads of these statements. Even Wang Yi, after he visited India and he left immediately for Pakistan, first went to Afghanistan and then to Pakistan. There also he said that, like always, China supports Pakistan's sovereignty. What is Pakistan's sovereignty? So that support is always there. So, you know, all these narratives that, yes, Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping met and it's the era of a new century, we've heard all of this earlier. None of that has come true. There are no significant agreements. The ones that have been talked about or are being pondered over are very low hanging fruits like increasing flights, direct flights, more people to people. None of these are real issues in the India China relationship. So I don't see how any of these outcomes could be in India's favor, except for the fact that there has been a calling out of the Pahalgam terrorist attack. So I'll just end it here and then maybe I'll take
Yeah,
questions.
yeah. I think you brought out a very important point. As we want to develop and economy has to grow and all that, we need new market. We need new trading partners. So the important aspect which you made, why this SCO was important for us, is the SCO had, apart from the initial 10 member countries, others also came. There were 26 countries with whom you had to deal with. And if we noticed, all of us, the prime minister had put out his discussions with a lot of people. In fact, very importantly, he met the Nepalese prime minister there. He also met the Myanmarese, dictator, General Min Hyong Long, right? So I think there are a lot of bilaterals which he went through, which eases a lot of things around, us and in our bilaterals. Another thing which happened was we managed to stop Azerbaijan from becoming a member. That
Hmm.
also, I think, it's come out in some form. So it's just not about India and China.
Hmm.
The Russia-India partnership was reinforced because rarely does a Russian president wait 10 minutes for the
Hmm.
Indian prime minister and then they go have a 40-minute talk in the car and all that.
Hmm.
So something has happened there, which is
Hmm.
positive, which gives. And I'd like just to highlight what Dr. Patak said. The
Hmm.
India-Russia alignment or the partnership gives us a hedge against both China and USA. So to that extent, I think these were the things. Yeah, I agree with what she said about our talk with China. Except for the talk, if you see what both of them exchanged, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi in Kazan, to now there's not much of a difference. The wording, the same mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual trust. All these things were there. The same lack of trust was there. I mean, lack of trust has been repeated. Everything. There's been no great forward movement on trade, and except that Mansarovar Yatra has started, and some flights are to start. We don't know when they will start ultimately. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing much. But having said that, the question which comes to mind is where do we go from here with China? So that's the point which, after all, we have to deal with them. And then, of course, the secondary question which comes is where do you go ahead with USA? Because a lot of this thing we came here because of USA. So we'll start with China and then we'll gravitate to USA.
Sure. So I think this is the beginning of a new sort of world order. Why do I say this? Every time that the international system has come under such a strain, be it after the 80 years war in Europe, 30 years war, First World War, Second World War. There has been some sort of a new formulation. After Treaty of Westphalia got signed, talking about sovereignty, League of Nations, United Nations. We've seen all of these. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, then we had the emergence of multipolarity and so on. I think this epoch of history is now showing us and teaching us that the hegemon, which is technically supposed to manage the stability of the international system, it itself is a revisionist power. Till last year, at least, it was assumed that China is the revisionist power. But here we are, Donald Trump and his crazy, malicious policies, they are revisionist in nature. I think his own quote has said that a lot of his tariffs are illegal and so on. But here's the thing, both China and the US think might is right and they can bully the world. My suspicion is that Donald Trump wants a G2 with China because he did try to curtail them. But when he realized that the Chinese are still holding their ground, the second best option is to have some sort of a G2 partnership with the Chinese and make the Chinese a subservient partner. Would China agree to it or not is another different story altogether. But this is his plan. Otherwise, throwing all allies and partners under the bus while shielding China, as we have seen in the case of not calling out China for importing Russian oil, it doesn't make sense. Donald Trump from day one has been fawning over Xi Jinping, calling him an intelligent man, a great man, and so on. And in fact, Xi Jinping was the only leader, world leader, who was invited to Donald Trump's swearing in. The other people invited were not the heads of their states per se. So that's also a good enough clear indication. Also, the US has let go of all the export controls on critical technology and so on, which the Biden government had put in place, rightfully identifying China as a malicious actor. But why would the US under Trump 2.0 now remove it? This is to placate China. There is no other rational reason for this otherwise. Also, the TikTok ban, it never came in, even though it was going to be implemented. So, all in all the signals are there that Donald Trump wants his own agreement with the PRC and the two want to bully the world together. This is a situation which has never been witnessed in the world before. So, I just hope that India can emerge as the third pole out. One doesn't have to choose between the US or between China, but India has more credibility and India is standing up to both the bullies in its own way. So I think this should be a historic opportunity. It's also giving India a lot of responsibility to understand the sort of power it holds and the direction in which it should take the international system forward. So that's that. As far as the Chinese are concerned, as I said, the army stayed again. Vibrant Villages program to defend India against Chinese incursions or Chinese attacks, that also stays. Technological upgrades are being made. India is selling BrahMos missiles to a lot of Southeast Asian countries, Philippines in particular. India's partnerships with Taiwan also stay. In fact, when Wang Yi did come to India, he tried bullying India, tried bullying Dr. Jaishankar, in fact, into saying that Taiwan is a part of China. And our
Yeah,
and also clarified that we never said that that Taiwan is a part of China. This is this is pushing back against the PRC. Over and above that, also I think Dr. Jaishankar clearly asked that if you can trade with Taiwan, why not the others? So this is also pushing back. So India does the pushing back against bullies. Diplomacy stays in its place because no country in the world would really want a war. India also won't want a war. But if it's pushed to that extent, it would undertake it. But till situations can be managed with diplomacy, India is still trying. With the US in particular, there's a lot of backdoor discussions which are still going on. 28 sectoral agreements discussions are still on. In fact, yesterday, after the photograph of President Prime Minister Modi and Putin and Xi Jinping came out, within 2 hours, there was a tweet from Marco Rubio saying that India US relationships are perfect and they are going the right way and so on. The question here is why? India US relations are in the doldrums thanks to Donald Trump. He's a revisionist power, he's a sovereign entity in himself. But why did Rubio have to tweet this? After all the insults which his administration has actually hurled at India, at our prime minister, at Indians, and so on. So that optics of that one photograph of India, Russia, and China, that hit the target. So that's about it. Are we really trusting China? No, not really. Nothing is actually moving forward. Russia It's always been a time tested partner. It's always going to be one. Japan, another time tested partner, always has been, always will be. Here's the thing, here's the difference between Japan and Russia on one side and the US and China on the other. Neither have Russia nor have Japan asked India for anything in return of the sorts that don't buy oil from XYZ or don't trade with Taiwan and so on. But the bullies do this. Neither has Japan done this, nor has Russia done this. India has taken help from them in the past, militarily or economically, and so on, but never have these friends actually asked for anything in return. Another friend is Israel, of course, but that's for another separate discussion. So, all in all, these two bullies, US and China, want to reshape the international order, and they too want to be at the helm of affairs while throwing every other country under the bus. But that's not going to really happen because let's see, maybe 3.5 years, maybe 7 years, maybe 10 years. How long can this sort of an administration really last?
Right. I think you panned out, fleshed out a lot of things in this small talk of yours, this section of your talk. And what you really said that the world order is changing and a G2 is likely. Okay, here it comes. And you also mentioned that, look, we've had a great relationship with Russia, which is a fact. We also had a great relationship with Japan, which is also a fact. Now, you'll agree with me, a G2 is neither in China's interest, no, I mean, not in Russia's interest or in Japan's interest, nor in our interest. And I'll get another country in Brazil. And today, Brazil is also in the same, status as we are. It's
Hmm,
not in Brazil's interest also, from what you can make out, for a G2 to come in, right? Now, if
hmm,
that be so, and I don't know whether G2 is in the interest of Europe,
hmm,
come to think of it, because any kind of a G2 under Europe, Europe will just get finished off.
hmm.
Is there a case for India to do something about this and start something, you know, I wouldn't say non-aligned movement, but well, which whatever you call it, is there a case for us to start? Because we have the experience of the non-aligned movement, heading it and providing an alternative, if not alternative, at least the optics of that to scare this G2 away.
So I think we've always been emphasizing strategic neutrality and prioritizing one's own national interests. The other countries have always done it, but the expectation is always from India that it takes part in others' wars and so on. But now, given that this situation has emerged, I think it'll be clearer for other countries, especially in Europe, to understand why India has opted for non alignment in the past and for strategic neutrality now. So I think what India is doing by holding its ground against bullying from the US and from the Chinese, I think it's a good enough example because even the Japanese now, last week, they refused to send one of their
Yeah,
important ministers for.
that trade representative
Yes.
didn't go to US,
Yes,
right?
and they are also
And
supremely enraged at the fact that this guy just keeps slapping more and more tariffs. So what
and
is
not
the
only
point?
that, it's very surprising. Trump wants $550 billion from Japan, out of which 90% profits will be for USA. So who will
Yes.
give it to him,
So
right?
yeah,
So I don't,
yeah. So I
right?
think
And also, Japan has huge problems with China.
yeah.
I mean, on Senkakus and other places.
Hmm.
So I think, sooner or later, that's why I said Japan, Brazil, India,
Hmm.
uh, Russia. Russia
Hmm.
won't like a G2
Hmm.
because,
Russia won't like the G2. Russia, it's not like Russia has a problem only with the US. It also
oh,
has
yeah, yeah.
issues with the PRC. It's just that it's now not coming out because unfortunately there's a war in Ukraine and the bigger enemy is the West. But it's not like Russia and China also don't have their issues. They also have their set of issues. So there'll be a pushback to the G2, and I'm glad that India has taken a lead because the Japanese are also now very tacitly pushing back. The Australians also have done it. So I think it's just going to increase even more. So um, Trump needs to understand that his stupid mathematics, which make no sense because unfortunately he's not educated, need to be done away with if he wants to. If he wants to make America great again, because right now what he's doing, I'll use just one Hindi word, is make America Gawar again. wherein you just rely on
That's a nice one. Make America Gamar again.
just
Yeah.
just rely on your stupid TikTok and just imagine and envisage and dream about a great America. America as the hegemon or the leader of the international system remains as a great country, but the moment it is not, I don't know what it is. Pardon me. So there's going to be pushback against. There are a lot of Republican voices also which are coming up against Republicans against these tariffs and these stupid policies of the US. So let's just hope. I don't have too much hopes from Europe though, because I think we all saw as to how they were sitting around Donald Trump. That sort of a body language or that sort of an imagery doesn't evoke confidence, wherein you kowtow to an emperor and take whatever bullying that he does. Unless Europe can push back in whatever ways that it does in their own European style, I don't get that sort of confidence that they'll be able to hold ground either against the PRC or against the US.
Should we have a, I want a bicameral approach towards USA? One is you start dealing with, Trump and his cabinet in one manner. And then you start dealing, because you see, the connectivity between India and USA is pretty deep. Our relations are pretty deep. Say 20 years back, it didn't matter whether USA was here in India or not. Okay. You go back, if I go back to the times of 71 when the war happened, we had absolutely no connection with America except Coca-Cola, which we threw them out at that point of time. But today it's not so. We have a huge diaspora out there. That's a market, whether you like it or not. It's the biggest market. And it's also the richest country. You have deep defense ties with them. Over 25 years, you've developed. And, the American businesses invested into India. Their global capability centers are here. So is there a way for us, or is there a case for us to start dealing with USA on two tracks? And
So even
go ahead.
yeah,
Even
so
they would like it.
yeah, his administration, unfortunately, it's a difficult spot for them because they won't want to be laid off by Donald Trump because he has this emperor syndrome, just the way China and Xi Jinping had. So they call themselves a democracy, but it's an autocracy. Anyone who tries to speak any sort of sense into Donald Trump as to why India is such an important partner and why the partnership needs to stay, he or she will just simply get fired. So it's a tough spot for them, but it is understandable through State Department statements or even a lot of other American official statements who one meets in day-to-day lives on a daily basis, either in India or in the US, that there is the desire that there's this sort of a mad behavior coming from Donald Trump stops. But the madness is not going to stop, unfortunately. So at least for the next 3.5 years, we'll have to brace. We cannot, I don't think India wants to kowtow to the US the way Europeans did. I don't think that's a very smart move because this wasn't India's fault at all. There's just it's just a crazy, again, a Gamar policy coming from the US. So we'll just have to live with it, which is why I think we are not even responding to it. It's not even worthy of being responded to. When you see a mad dog, when a mad dog bites you, you don't go and bite it back. So we'll just have to wait it out for a bit. If and when Donald Trump moves out, and if there's a saner government, the relationship will be rebuilt, but the damage to India's trust has been done. Everyone understands that India is an important partner for the stability of the rules based international order. India will do its part, but would it trust America again? Because what Trump has now done is that he's destroyed all the work which were done by successive US governments and by successive Indian governments in building this partnership. That trust is not going to come back easily, but the partnership will survive Donald Trump and his crazy mathematics.
Yeah. So the partnership will survive, but it's going to be a rocky partnership for going ahead. In fact, I'm of the opinion that the strategic part of the partnership is gone. Even the partnership is gone. I would say today what we have is a relationship with USA, and that relationship is sectoral, sector by sector, and at the government to government, it's not there. And I would like to tell everyone, even today, as things are going downhill with USA, the defense cooperation is still going on for some whatever reason it is. One of our units had to go to Alaska. They've already left yesterday to go and do a joint exercise with US in Alaska for the next 14 days. So that's on. Whether it's just the momentum of the past which is going on and it will dry out soon, or will this momentum, sustain this relationship for a longer time, is to be seen, right? With all this, how do you think our relationship with China will go ahead, given what is there and whatever is there? And also, there's a whole lot of mistrust from China saying, look, whatever India is doing is only Barsati. This is only for this point of time. They want to, play us off against USA and things like that. So, how do you think, we'll go ahead with China?
So I'll come to the second part first. They think India is playing them and using them, but the statements come from the Chinese side saying that we are willing to support India against US bullying, against US
Bullying and
hegemony,
all that.
US sovereignty. India has never said that. So who is using who here? That's the question. So if they want to imagine that, it's their choice, of course, even though they don't really have choice in their countries. But okay, since we are from the world's largest democracy.
Yeah.
So China wants to use India, which is otherwise, why would it make those statements? It's talking about India's sovereignty is important. Like, hello, China talking about the importance of India's sovereignty, but they did it in the backdrop of US tariffs. So the Chinese are the happiest that the partnership between India and US is in the doldrums, and they want to use India as a shield to push towards the US. Look, all their diplomacy has been happening with the US ever since. They are also hopeful for some sort of a trade deal and so on. And in fact, let's look at it this way: they are facing 30% tariffs. India is actually facing 50% tariffs. So really, who is pushing who? Like, it's not making logical sense. So Chinese narratives, before they put it out, they probably need to rethink it. But again, that's too much to ask of them. Where will India go ahead with this? So even through this one example, it's very clear what China wants India for. It just wants India as a tool in its own tirade with the US against the West, and it wants to be the hegemon. Is that acceptable to India? That's not acceptable to India, because militarily it sits and it tries to, salami slice our sovereignty. Economically, it wants to exploit a market all over again. India is the fastest growing major economy, not the PRC. So I don't, again, coming back to that narrative, oh, India is just using it because India needs China economically. Like, hello, 7.8% versus 4 point whatever. So, a reality check is really needed over there. So China needs India right now. Otherwise, why would Wang Yi travel to India, talk about meeting all of a sudden for special representative talks, and then engage in all sorts of discussions except special representative talks and mention the economy? Who needs who? It wasn't Dr. Jaishankar who went to the PRC asking for a specific meeting or for a special representative talks and then completely deviating from the topic which was decided on. It was the PRC. So the Chinese need India. They need India's market. They need us to open up again. They want to exploit us all over again. And they want to use India geopolitically against India's partners. Okay, the US might be an enemy at the moment, but as Sir and I both said that, yeah, there's a long-term partnership. Okay, even if we forget the US, there is Japan, there is Taiwan, there is Australia, there are even European countries. Those are still our friends and partners. So throwing all of them under the bus, I don't think that is something which India wants. So it's actually China which wants to leverage and use India, not the other way around.
Yeah, I go with you completely. Yesterday at the tail end of this SCO meet, Xi Jinping came out with this great idea of this global, governance initiative. Where do you think that is going and what's his intent? Of course, his intent is well known. There's part of the, one more step towards a Sino-centric world order, which for some reason China seems to be having, despite the fact that their economy is tanking. Politically, they are in shambles internally. The PLA and the CCP are at loggerheads at some level, right? The demography, which is the main thing, what is people, what is a republic without a people? And that people are vanishing at the fastest rate in human history. But all this, he comes out with this global, governance initiative. What do you make of that?
So it's a projection at two different levels. One, because it's China's own domestic audience is under deep strain. there is the feeling which is increasing that the CPC is not really powerful, it's not really credible. So, whenever something happens domestically, the best way to project power is to showcase that China is taking on the world, it's taking on responsibility. So, it's just it's that's one part of the signal. Second, as Xi Jinping also said, he aims to foster a more equitable global governance system. So he's clearly aiming it at the West, equitable global governance system. We all know what China's governance system actually is, but he again says this is just signaling, and it's aimed at the global South countries. And he talks about sovereign equality, international rule of law, multilateralism, people centered approach. China talking about a people centered approach. People don't even vote, and real action. So, and it tried to project the SCO as a key platform to challenge Western dominated global structures and so on. Now, the GCI, as you correctly said, is China's wish for showcasing itself as the better leader out of the US and the PRC. It doesn't augur really well for India. So, which is why I don't think India should throw its weight
No,
behind
no.
this sort
Throwing
of.
with weight is out of question. How do we deal with it is the bigger question. Because
We
see,
listen.
lot of countries around us will throw their weight with them, or will be forced to throw their weight with them. That's the point.
So there's nothing which we can done because when our neighbors they want to take part in it and they become a part of the China-led effort to reshape global governance, um, marginalizing India's influence, of course, then there's no way we can technically stop that. But what we can continue doing is somehow still emphasize the fact that the neighborhood needs to be stable, and maybe we project that a little bit more in terms of how India's projects in South Asia, including in Sri Lanka, including in Maldives, or Nepal for that matter, have been completed on time as compared to the PRC. The more statistics and more data we start producing in more user friendly formats, the narrative tilts. Would it really tilt in India's favor, given that our most of our neighbors, at least, are hostile to India? It's still worth a shot. Why not give it a try at least? Also, this anti-Western tilt, which this GCI has, that also doesn't help India. Maybe our partners would be happy to go along with it. So be it. Let them go. There's no way we can actually stop it, but we project our own capabilities. I think that would be the best way forward. And so, in all honesty, as the economy, Chinese economy suffers more, these narratives will,
Die down.
this
Yeah, that.
they'll dissipate. Just the way the BRI is now, not very clear. They're now talking about green BRI and those sorts of things, repackaging it, digital BRI and so on. This will also fizzle out
Go.
in the long run.
Okay. Right. Okay. Before I take on a few questions, because I see a lot of questions here and a lot of views which we can discuss. Give me your assessment of China. How do when you deal with a country, you need to know how strong or weak it is.
Hmm.
Uh, you've been there and you've been following China and you've been writing and you've been talking. So give a view as to where do you see China, say 6 years ahead from here. I'm not talking of a long horizon, not that 2040 kind of a projection. Just
Hmm.
about 5 years. Given the fact that its economy is tanking and
Hmm.
there's very little chance of recovery, I'm putting words into your mouth. Their demographic problems are going to continue. We don't know who Xi Jinping's replacement is.
Hmm.
We don't know what the leadership, what the political system is,
Hmm.
and many other things we can go on, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
all their infrastructure projects and all that are long term. We don't know they'll be able to complete it or not, and all that.
Hmm.
So, given all this, how do you assess China?
So the assessment will be complete only if we know how the US behaves in the next 5 years. So there are two
Okay,
possibilities. One, US keeps behaving the way that it is. So that creates more space for the Chinese, for the PRC. Because, yeah, of course, if there is a vacant space right at the top because America has been made Gamar again, then China will rush to fill in that space. So that is one possibility, irrespective of the fact how its economy is doing. The fact is that it does possess a lot of trillions of dollars in forex reserves. So that's of course there. Yes, it has created certain military bases around the world as well. Now, if the US is willing to pull out of key institutions like WHO and so on, Paris climate talks and so on, so it creates more space for the PRC. So that's one problem. The second is if there is rationality which comes back to Donald Trump or another administration takes power. So, if there is a combined pushback from democracies and the ones which are concerned about China's malicious usage of economics, maybe it would be a brighter future for the democratic world and including with India. There is one thing for sure: the Chinese people are united. Irrespective of all things done.
Yeah,
When we talk about power, it's not just land or the military. One of the most important indices is also the people. The people are united. They will throw their weight in the name of the PRC, which other countries, most importantly democracies, do not really have. That's there. Militarily, with or without their economic development, the military growth will continue because their long-term goal is to overtake Taiwan and so on. And Xi Jinping he cannot really show a weaker face, which is why I think there are so many purges also happening. He probably wants to have more yes men and yes women, and who will be absolutely loyal to them because he has plans. So I give a pessimistic picture because always it's better to be prepared than to be sorry. So there will be muscle flexing which will happen from the PRC. If the US is not there, even better for it. If the US is still there, if Chinese economy tanks, it wants to showcase itself as more powerful, it will engage in more skirmishes. So India has to be prepared for that. The first hit is always taken by India, not even by Taiwan. So we've seen multiple examples from history. So one has to be prepared. China is not going to disappear anytime soon because
yeah, yeah. That it's too big.
that's, yeah. So
It's too
so
big.
it will be
1.4 million people are not going to vanish. You
yeah.
can't wish them away,
Yeah,
right?
so it's
That's
going to
there.
be
It's
around.
go-
Yeah, it's going to be around, and it's better if we prepare for the worst. Let's assume that the US will disappear because who knows really how much, to what levels the Trump 2.0 can actually stoop down to, no one really knows. So let's assume a worst case scenario that China is the hegemon, although I wouldn't want it. But then how do countries push back against it? That's something which is important. And being prepared militarily, economically, technologically would be the best foot forward.
right. Thanks a lot. We've had a terrific discussion.